I put these animals back on distiller grains today. I had them on a total mixed ration for about a week, and I've been taking a look at the quality of their manure. And on a scale from 1 to 10, with a 1 being rock hard poops and a 10 being just straight liquid gas, they're at about a 4. And so I really want them at about a 6. I really want that stool to be a little bit loose. And I'm really looking to have that stool be a little bit loose, but it's a little bit clumped up. It's not a solid stack. At a 5, it would just be a manure patty. It would just be a solid little manure patty. Not real solid, but not clumped up. But their manure is clumped up. And also, from what I have seen, with having these animals on grass, especially if they're on some kind of a prairie grass. If they're not on some kind of like a winter wheat, right? Winter wheat forage is something kind of different because it's an annual forage, and it's a hybrid annual forage, and the feed values of winter wheat are absolutely astronomical. With prairie grass and stuff like this, and especially right now with not having had much rain at all for about the last 45 days. I haven't had much rain at all for about the last 45 days. The feed values of the grass are not, they're not bad, but they're not great. Okay, I would say that the protein values of the grass are probably somewhere around 12%, and the digestibility is probably around 65%. I don't have any seed heads on the grass. The grass hasn't gone to, the grass is definitely still vegetating. It is green. I did fertilize it, and it's probably got about a 12% protein and about a 65% digestibility. And when I put them on a total mixed ration, their manure is clumping up a bit. And so this morning I did put them back on distiller grains. And the whole thing about the cattle feed and what to feed cattle is that it really depends, okay? There is no just flat out answer. Yeah, when I talk about cattle feed, the metrics that I talk about are digestibility, TDN, and I talk about protein, right? And then I talk about the idea of having a total mixed ration, a complete feed, or a supplementation, right? Supplementation is effectively just giving them some grain while they're eating grass. And it really depends on what and also what kind of animal do you have? Is your animal 250 pounds? Is your animal 500 pounds? Is your animal 800 pounds? I mean, what's going on, right? There are a lot of metrics, all right, and the most reasonable way to discuss this idea is to keep track of their manure. If taking a look at their manure is a very reasonable, it's a very simple way to take a look at what is going through the digestive system of the animal. In terms of like a generality, for an animal that is between 250 and 500 pounds, for an animal that's between 250 450 pounds, 14% protein is pretty good. For an animal that's between 450 and 800 pounds, 12 to 14% is pretty good. Okay, when I talk about the percentage of protein, I also consider the units of protein that the animal ingests, right? Because it's also important to understand that if the feed values of the feed stuff are too low, the animal will eat less food because they are having difficulty digesting the feed. Okay? And so when your animals are eating a roughly optimal type diet, they should be eating about 3.25% of their body weight a day in dry matter. And they should be having a manure score of about a 5 or a 6. Their body conditioning score should be at about a 6. When you take a look at the animal, you don't want the animal to just be hefty up top, right? I linked that PowerPoint presentation. When you take a look at the animal, you want to make sure that the animal has some heft on their rear end and some heft on the bottom side of the animal. You don't want the heft to be up top on the animal, okay? If the heft of the animal is up top, That's a very real possibility that the animal is not going to have a very good quality carcass. All right, you want the heft to be down low, and to properly fatten an animal takes a long time. It takes a long time. If you fatten the animal too quickly, there's a very real possibility that a good bit of that fat actually ends up on the back of the animal, and that fat is just going to get cut off the animal when the carcass is harvested. All right, it's not going to be intramuscular fat. There is a a well-studied correlation between the time on feed and the intramuscular fat deposition of the animal. Okay, and there is also a very strong correlation between the consumption of grain and intramuscular fattening as well. When I have my animals, when I first bring them in, up until they're about 450 pounds, I usually bring in my animals between 200 and 250 pounds. And up until they're about 450 pounds, I don't feed them hardly any grass at all. I only feed them grass after they've eaten as much grain as they want to eat. And I only feed them the grass if the grass is of sufficient quality. Okay? All grass is not good grass. All right, if you have grass like this and you have them on corn, you're going to severely, your animals will severely underperform. If you have your animals on grass like this and you keep them on a total mixed ration, your animals are going to severely underperform. Okay, how do you know that your animals are performing well on a day-to-day basis? You check the quality of their manure. You want their manure to be a little bit loose. I don't come up with this stuff, okay? I didn't just magically come up with this stuff. I read about this stuff, and from what I have seen with my own life, this stuff makes a lot of sense. And also, it's important to understand that when it comes to money, right? I make a lot of money. All right? If and I've talked about if I legitimately needed cash, the whole idea about having good investments is if you have good investments, you don't need cash. You do need enough cash to get by on a day-to-day basis, but you shouldn't be concerned about stockpiling cash. And in reality, stockpiling cash is not a good idea to begin with, because it's a piece of paper. The government can print as much of it as they want, and et cetera, okay? You're better off with a good investment than you are cash. And the whole idea about cash is if I legitimately needed cash, which is a bad sign. If you ever see somebody who legitimately needs money, they say, oh my God, not going to say legitimately need money, because you can legitimately, but the whole idea of needing money, if you find somebody who ever says that they need money, I need money right now, that's a very bad sign. Why do you need money? What did you do, right? The whole idea is if you legitimately need money, you must have messed up very badly. Why do you need money? Right? No, but why do you need money? If I legitimately needed money, if I had some kind of a problem, I wouldn't have any investments, right? If I legitimately needed money, I could sell some of my cattle, right? The whole idea of needing money is that's very bad. Why do you need money? That's not good. Okay, that is not good. And when it comes to raising the animals properly, if you put on 2 pounds a day, and let's say that you have farmer A and you have farmer B, and farmer A is putting on 2 pounds a day, and farmer B is putting on 3 pounds a day. Farmer B will make 50% more money than farmer A. Makes a lot of sense, right? So farmer A would put on 60 pounds a month on the cattle, and farmer B will put on 90 pounds a month. But also, it's important to understand that if you have a 450 pound animal and you're putting on 2 pounds a day, that animal will probably not be developing a quality carcass. All right? And when it comes to making money, I the whole thing about my cattle is that I depend, it doesn't even matter. My cattle get the top of the market almost all the time. For their class of cattle, my cattle get the top of the market effectively all the time. When it comes to money, money's not an opinion. If you have a bunch of opinions and you have nothing to show for it, you're going to die poor. That's a sign that you're an idiot. This is not funny. Life is not a journey, right? Think about it through an objective lens. You need to put on, if you have a 500-pound animal, and that animal is and you're looking to raise that animal from 500 pounds to 800 pounds, you probably need to put on about, granted that you have at least a medium large frame beef animal, number 1 to 1.5 type. We're talking about a beef animal, okay? And that animal has a medium to a large frame. You will need to put on about 2.5 pounds a day at least to make sure that that animal has enough energy reserves to be depositing fat intramuscularly. The fat always forms, in terms of a general rule of thumb, the fat will form on the external portion of the carcass first before it is deposited before it is deposited intramuscularly. So if your animal is not putting on enough fat to put on, the maximum amount of fat that it can put on, it will just end up depositing that fat on its back. And that will lower the quality of the carcass. You will be increasing your yield score while not increasing your quality score at all. Your yield score will be going from a 2 to a 3 to a 4, but your animal will not have any kind of, you probably won't go to a 4 if you're, granted that you don't have some like 3-year-old animal that you've been putting on 2 pounds a day, okay? Most of these animals get harvested at about 14 to 20, 16 to 22 months, something like that of age. And so, no, but if you're not putting on at least 2 pounds a day, if you're not putting on at least 2.5 pounds a day on a 500-pound animal, if you're not putting on at least 2.5 pounds a day, chances are your animal is not going to grade. The quality of the animal, the quality of the carcass won't be very good. You could definitely improve the quality of the carcass. If you have your animals on complete feed, like complete grain all the time, you may be able to improve the quality of the carcass. But if you have, you may be able to improve the quality of the carcass, at 2 pounds a day. You probably will be able to, just because the grain will more or less, the grain is more likely to put intramuscular fat on your animal. But if you have, a lot of people have their animals on grass. All right, you see this happen a lot. A lot of people have their animals on grass, and that animal is putting on like 1.5 to 2 pounds a day. That is not good. Okay, that is how you end up in a situation where you start losing money because the quality of the animal is going down. Is not doing very well at all. Okay, and then on the other side of things, you also have people who feed their cattle, and they feed their cattle a whole bunch of energy stuffs. And the cattle ends up at like a yield grade 4 or 5 by the time the animal's at 800 pounds. You also don't want that. If your animal's at a yield 4 or a 5, by the time they're 800 pounds, that's not good either, okay? That's not optimal. All right, you want to slowly fatten the animal over a long period of time. All right, you want to make sure that the animal fattens throughout its entire life. You don't want to end up with a super, because if you have a yield grade 4 or 5, the animal is not going to be you're going to lose money on the sale of the animal, okay? And so you really want to have the animal just fattening throughout its entire life, okay? You really want the yield score to be at about a 3. And you really want the heft of the animal to be on down low. You don't want the heft of the animal to be up top on its back. Oh, but think about it from an objective lens. All right, farmer A makes $2 or puts on 2 pounds a day, and farmer B puts on 3 pounds a day. Farmer B will make 50% more money than farmer A, and it'll actually probably be a little bit more, because an animal that is 500 to 800 pounds putting on 3 pounds a day, granted that the animal is eating some kind of a good diet, right, has grain in their diet, and etc., etc., that animal will just get a higher premium at the market. You really want to be selling premium animals, okay? You really want to be selling, high quality animals, okay? You don't want to be selling a low quality, because you're going to lose money for that, okay? You want to be selling high quality. All right, you want to be and in terms of having a properly raised animal, what am I talking about, right? The animal should be at a yield grade of about a 3, okay? By the time they're at about 800 pounds, you want them to be at a yield grade of 3, and you want them to have put on about 2.5 to 3 pounds a day. And you want, I feed, up until the animals are about 450 pounds, from 200 pounds to 450 pounds, about 75% of their diet is 75 to 90% of their diet is grain. And then when they're 500 pounds to 800 pounds, about 25 to 35% of their diet is grain. Okay, when I start switching the animals over, about 25% of the animals' diet is grain. All right, from 500 pounds to 800 pounds. And also the grass that the animals are on are of sufficient quality. Okay? You want to make sure that your animals are growing properly, and you will get more premiums for your cattle. You will get more money for your cattle if you are selling premium cattle. Okay? You will get more money if you are selling higher end cattle. Okay? And that's, I raise beef cattle, and I'm very meticulous about how I raise my animals, okay? And so right now, the solution to I'm looking to figure out, how am I looking to invest this money and, prepare myself for the long term, right? Prepare myself for the medium term, for the next 6 months to a year. And I figured that the solution to my business is not to, because I don't want to be in a situation where I sell 5 animals this month and I only buy 5 and then I use the rest of the money to buy the herbicide and the grain. I don't want to do that, because later on down the line, 7 months down the line, I'll only be selling 5 cattle again. So I figured that the best way to solve this problem is to spread the expenses out over a couple of months. So instead of selling 5 and buying 5 and then buying everything that I need, I'm gonna sell 5, I'm gonna buy 9, and I'm gonna pay for the grain. And then next month I'll sell 5, I'll buy 9, and then I'll pay for the herbicide. And then the next month, if I see an opportunity to do so, the next month I will sell 5 and buy 9, and then buy more herbicide for the other field. So that's what I've decided to do. I'll sell 5 and I'll buy 9, and then I'll use the rest of the money to pay for whatever I need. In terms of the medium term, in terms of like the 6 month to year type planning, why am I doing what I'm doing? Because right now I'm effectively, for the last 2 months, I have effectively situated myself. So 2 months ago, I bought 10 animals. Okay, I sold 5 and I bought 10. Okay, I sold 5 and I bought 10. What did I do? What was that? Was that 2 months ago when I sold the heifers? When I sold the white heifers? Yeah, that was about 2 months ago, right? It may have been 3 months, 2 or 3 months. It's October now. So when I sold those heifers, I bought more animals, and then I used, I sold 15 cattle, and then I did not buy 10. Well, there was 1 month where I bought 10. I sold what was it? I sold like 20 cattle. I sold like 20 or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but I used some of the money to pay for the debt. And then to pay for debt. And then I used some of the money to clear the land. And then I reinvested the debt. And when I reinvested the debt, I bought 10 animals. And then the next month, so last month I bought 10 animals, right? Last month I bought 10 animals. This month I bought 5 animals. Or excuse me, I bought 4 animals. I bought 8 animals last month. I bought 8 animals. I bought 12 total. And I bought 4 animals this month so far, and I'm going to buy 9 more. Okay, I'm going to sell 5 and I'm going to buy 9 more. So that means I'll have, bought 13 animals this month. I bought 8 animals last month. And so effectively in 5 more months, I will have 8 animals ready to go. And then the month after that, I will have 13. And then the month after that, I will have 9. Okay, so I'm effectively looking to sell about 10 calves on a monthly basis here within by early next year. I am looking to sell about 10 calves on a monthly basis. When I sell my cattle and I bring home a check, I am not selling all my animals. That is pool number 3. The check in my hand is pool number 3. All right? The check in my hand is pool number 3. I did not sell all my animals to make that money. I sold a small fraction of my animals. Why? And if I sell 10 animals, how much, and the feeder cattle market is going sideways, and I liquidate my animals at 800 pounds on the average, how much money would I be making on a monthly basis? In terms of cash in my hand, about $25,000 to $27,000 a month in terms of cash in my hand, right? That's how much money I would be bringing home as cash in my hand. But I would not be selling all of my animals. If anything, the front end of my herd will begin to get disproportionately larger once I start investing with debt. Right now, I am just putting all the money back into my business, and I'm just growing my business. If I legitimately need money, I can sell some of my cattle. All right? If I legitimately need money, I can sell some of my cattle. But why would I legitimately need money? And I also have a credit card. Okay? I can pay for it. It doesn't matter. Money, I'm not concerned about money. All right? Even right now, in terms of how much money do I make when I sell my 5 animals, how much money do I reasonably anticipate that I will bring home? Probably like 14 grand. I probably will bring home like $14,000. Somewhere between $12,000 and $14,000. Okay? When I sell my 5 animals, I did not sell my entire herd. All right? The appreciation value of my herd also has a monetary value. Granted that I appraise the appreciation properly, I'm even looking to leverage against that. All right? As of today, how much money do I reasonably anticipate that I make? Somewhere around $30,000 to $35,000 a month. That's how much money I bring home. I am looking to increase that to about $80,000 a month by February or March. How am I going to do that? Up until then, I will reinvest all of the money that I make back into my business, which will increase my equity stake and increase the proportion of equity that I have on my balance sheet in terms of a relation to my debt. That is how I'm going to do it. The answer has been the same for weeks, right? I did not change anything. And if I changed something, if I made a minor detail change, if I clarified something, then I will tell you like I did today. I have decided that I'm going to sell 5 and buy 9. I will spread the expenses out over the next several months. Even if I do that, I will still end up with enough positive equity by February or March where I will probably have to buy about 50 cattle on debt just to take my debt to equity to 80%. By about March of next year, I will be selling about 10 calves on a monthly basis. That will produce me enough cash flow to reinvest back into my business, to grow my equity stake, and to provide more of a foundation to leverage against, while also producing me enough cash flow to float about $2 million in debt, while only using about 20%. Here's the thing. I wouldn't even be leveraged against 20% of my earnings if I took a loan for $2 million and if I was legitimately leveraging against my assets and my earnings, like leveraging against my equity and my cash flow. If I'm bringing home $25,000 a month, and I'm doing that by selling, if I'm bringing home $27,000 a month, and I'm doing that by selling 10 of my animals, and I say I have whatever, I have 120 animals. Because I will be putting more money into the front end of the herd once I am able to take leverage, right? I'm not going to go and buy big old giant animals. I'll be putting more money into the front end of my herd. So if I have 120 animals and I sell 10 of them to make 25 grand, the 110 animals that I have at home on a monthly basis will be making me more than $25,000. All right? The 110 animals that I have at home, granted that I am taking care of the animals properly, will be making me more money than pool number 3. So this is also what I mean by about March. I will be making I would reasonably anticipate that I'm bringing home about $80,000 a month. All right? Nothing has changed. I have not changed. If I have changed a minor detail, I will tell you. All right? The whole thing about me showing I've even asked the $1 million question, right? What do you think my business is worth? Let's take a look at my business from an objective metric. I started this business 3 years ago. Over the last 3 years, I have increased the size of my business. I have increased the revenue of my business by about 1,000%. I have positioned myself successfully to grow my business by another, 350%, by another 500% in the next 7 months. As of today, I reasonably anticipate that I will bring home about $12,000 to $14,000 a month. I will be reinvesting all of that money back into my business. And when I make that $12,000 to $14,000 a month, I am only going to be liquidating 1/8 or 1/7 of my investment portfolio. I'm in the beef cattle business. I'm a value add commodity trader. It's a very stable business. I'm not a stripper. All right. I'm not a drug dealer. All right. So we take a look at my business through an objective lens. What do you think my business is worth? It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter. It's multi-millions of dollars. Use some common sense. If I were just going if I were going to just evaluate my cash flow and not add any of my assets to it, just purchasing my cash flow, just putting an equitable evaluation on my cash flow of $14,000 a month, and I was not going to include any of my assets. I was only going to include, forget the cattle. I was only going to take a look at the $14,000 a month. So over the last 2 years, I increased, first of all, I started from zero, right? I started from zero. I increased my cash flow by 1,000% over the last 2 or 3 years. I reasonably anticipate that I will be able to increase my cash flow by 350% in the next 7 months, 500% in the next 7 months. What do you think is a reasonable multiple to put on my cash flow to give my business a reasonable evaluation? And this is also what I mean by my business. And then if you add my assets to it, my net worth right now is probably somewhere between $5 and $10 million. Over the next year, my net worth may even go over 50 million. over the next 365 days. And this is also what I mean by like, a lot of people, like you may like there's a, and I've talked about the idea of the spectator. There are three types of spectators, right? Number one, you have the people with the bias. You have the people with the bias, right? They don't know what successful people look like, but they think they know what successful people look like. And then you have number two. You have the people who are watching just because they think it's entertaining. They just want to watch because they want to watch. They don't have a bias. And then you have number three. The people who actually know what they're doing. Right? If I took a look at somebody's farm, I would be in group number three. I could tell you what's going on with that farm within 30 seconds of looking at it. If you're watching what I'm doing and you know what you're doing, you're probably crapping your pants. You know, the fact that I managed to do this in a backyard by myself, just me in a truck and one tractor, is borderline what in the world, right? That's borderline a what the heck type situation. You probably never seen anything like this before in your entire life. And when it comes down to it, I'm the one with the money. Okay? I'm the one with the money. I don't care. What am I going to do about it? Am I, well, I mean, first of all, I'm not a malicious person. I hope that you do turn yourself around, because if you end up in a situation where I've always said that if you suck, your life is going to be hard. And there is no sugarcoating this. If you suck, your life is going to be hard. All right, I'm serious. This is not a joke. And if you're going 180 degrees in the wrong direction, that's not funny. It's not cute. It's not amusing. All right. I mean, there's a very real possibility that you end up being an idiot, you being a net negative for the rest of your life. And that's not funny. That's not amusing. All right. And I'm not lying about this. I'm not lying about whatever. I'm not lying, right? That's the thing about me, is that I'm not a malicious person, and God knows it. I'm not a malicious person. It just is what it is. Money talks. All right? By early next year, my whole thing about leveraging is that I don't have stocks. My business may not have a definite equitable evaluation, but my business does definitely have cash flow. And I can leverage against the cash flow, even if I can't leverage against the stocks or whatever it may be. And I do have some assets that I can hold for collateral, right? I have my cattle and I have my land. And I have cash flow. So I'm going to leverage against my cash flow. And my whole thing about leveraging is, when I leverage, what do I do with the money? Do I go and live my dream? Do I go and YOLO the money? Do I go on a magical journey? No, I don't. What do I do with the money? I buy equitable assets with the intentions of making positive returns. What am I talking about? Land and more cattle. If I take a loan for $2 million, and, realistically, $2 million loan would be about 10% of the money that I make. I would only be leveraging against 10%. But, my objective in life is not to leverage myself to the eyeballs, okay? My objective in life is not to leverage myself to the eyeballs. I'm not interested in leveraging myself to the eyeballs. I don't want to know what the maximum loan is that the bank will give me. I don't care. What am I looking to do? I am looking to invest the money. I'm looking to buy whatever it is that I believe I reasonably need. What do I reasonably believe that I need? About 100 acres and a nice preconditioning facility. A very well-built preconditioning facility. That is what I believe I need. And about 50 more cattle, 70 more cattle by early next year. That is what I believe I reasonably need. So that is what I'm going to buy. And when I buy that, and I leverage against my earnings, I leverage against the amount of money that my business makes, my cash flow and my earnings on a monthly basis, realistically, I'll be leveraging against about 10% of what I make to take that loan for that $2 million. Maybe 15%. I'd be willing to leverage against about 20%. And, but even then, if I invest this money and I continue to run my business, that investment will make me a positive return, and I can always invest more money later down the line. I don't have to, throw all of my money at it. And the whole idea of throwing all of your money at something, it's not a good idea from a fundamental standpoint. I'll be investing about 10% to 20% of the money that I make to buy whatever it is that I need. And once I've done what I need to do, I can always invest more money, okay? So that's the big idea. All right, you don't want to end up in a situation where you're going the wrong way. If you're going 180 degrees in the wrong direction, you're not going to make it to the 10% mark if you live to be 5,000. There's a very real possibility that you end up becoming a net negative if you're not a net negative already. And that's not funny, and it's not cute, and it's not amusing.